Man, since the beginning of civilization, has been making rich use of the green treasure of these dreamlike valleys. The signs of human civilization and search for spiritual and aesthetic satisfaction can be seen on
Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the current situation in Kashmir, and in particular, as we all know, that Pakistan and India are not on talking terms. Their relationship has eroded over a period of time, and especially after this particular incident when the Indian government, in fact, abrogated this constitution and the article in particular 370 and took away the special rights of the Kashmiri people. And since then the curfew has been imposed there, a lot of problems, scarcity of food, water, medicine, you name it, and the problem is there. And on top, the atrocities committed by the Indian armed forces, though the number currently people say it's around 800,000 people, and they have injected more than 60,000 new troops. And the current situation is very fluid. People are in extreme problems, and the current, I would say, when you look at the situation or you look at the current problems faced by these people, it's not only related to water or is it related to food or the lack of medicine. The overall situation is so bad that people can't go out. Their houses have been torched, they have been subjected to extreme torture. And yesterday there was a story that three men, Kashmiri men, were picked up by the law enforcement agencies over there, and they were brutally beaten, and their voice was heard all over because they were on mics. Just imagine, this is the kind of strategy the Indian forces are using there. But still, when we talk about this indigenous struggle for freedom, that's still going on. Rather, it is gaining momentum with each passing day. Now, to talk about this and to further throw light on the aspect that obviously when we talk about Kashmir as a nuclear point, on one side you have Pakistan, on the other you have India. Though this was taken, this was basically a unilateral decision taken by the Indian forces, but the Kashmiri people, neither their will was considered nor the approach by their Hurriyat leaders or other leaders. In fact, they were all either arrested or under house arrest. Now, the statement coming from none other than the President of the United States of America. In fact, he called Narendra Modi for about half an hour and also called Prime Minister Imran Khan and discussed in detail about the current situation. And he mentioned that both the countries should make sure that they should not move towards any war. Rather, they should constrain and stay away from the current problem and make sure that the overall situation which has developed over a period of time should go down. And at the same time, he also, in fact, when he addressed, he meant that the role of both the prime ministers should be very clear, and it should be made very, very understandable to all the public that these two countries should not indulge in a war. It's not only for these two countries, not only for the region, but for the entire globe. This is going to be a big threat. So in order to diffuse the tensions currently, what can be the role of the superpower? For example, the role of USA, role of Russia, role of China, role of France, P5 I'm talking about, or Britain for that matter, or European Union. These are the major factors. This is how you can bring on both the countries on the negotiation table, and at least they can resume the dialogue process. Eventually, whether you talk about World War I, World War II, or you talk about any other war, at the end of the day, always the negotiations take place and then the issues are taken care of. To talk about this, we have with us in our studio. Let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Ambassador Arslan Saab, is a senior diplomat, sir. Thank you very much. We also have with us Dr. Professor Zafar Jaspal Saab. Zafar Saab is a foreign affairs expert, is also a strategic analyst, sir. Thank you very much. We'll also be talking to Amir Bilal Suhi Saab, who's an international law expert, and we'll be also trying to take a few calls from the journalists from USA. But to start off the show, sir, Arslan Rizvi Saab, the statement from none other than the President of USA, Donald Trump, where he says that both the countries need to lie constraint and basically try to diffuse the current tension. Now, sir, a lot of people believe that this was a very good gesture, and at least the major role of USA is yet to be seen, but at least something positive coming out from there. Sir, your take.
Well, as you know, his offer for mediation was talked about during the visit of our Prime Minister. Although the officials and the media in India had denied such a thing, but President Modi was not denied that at all, and the fact remains that it was very much so. It was made. The idea was perhaps that Modi would go ahead with what he has done in Kashmir, and when the tensions will rise, then they will use the office of President Trump to try and diffuse the situation. In other words, what they're basically wanting to do is that allow India to get away with what it has done, and putting once again the onus on Pakistan to show restraint. The Prime Minister very rightly in his conversation mentioned the fact that the danger that is resulting from this action by India, and most importantly, as you started with Kashmir, the situation in Kashmir and the plight of the Kashmiris that is there, and intervention to try and diffuse the situation there. We know that more than 4,000 or 5,000 people have been arrested and they have been taken out of Kashmir because their jails are full from there. They're trying to tell the world that we are easing the restrictions there by opening the schools and so forth, but there's no internet, there is no TV.
Complete curfew has been imposed, sir. People can't even go out.
Yes, so naturally nobody is wanting to go out and so on. The situation there is very grave. The main thing is that if you look at the international media for the last, since the time that the 5th of August, especially after Pakistan went to the Security Council, there has been a very positive, from the viewpoint of Pakistan, the coverage that is coming, condemning, or if not at least criticizing the oppression that is taking place, the raped victims, those who have been brutalized there, no action being taken, the special laws being criticized there, and also everybody pointing out the wrong thing that has been done by India. So whether it is Washington Post or New York Times, or whether it's in United States or UK or Europe or even Russia, and of course more strongly in Turkey. So what has happened is that the world focus has come here, and although India is trying to downplay this and trying to say that it's the violence that is from Pakistan, and Prime Minister Modi, apparently according to their External Affairs Ministry spokesperson, was trying to suggest that the violence that Pakistan is trying to incite.
We are inciting violence.
Inciting violence.
This is what he said.
Who are creating all the violence within the country. And we can see that, the international reaction to that, not only, internationally, but within India itself. I mean, the liberals like Anuruddha Roy and the Nobel laureates, and I mean, there are voices even coming within India.
Today I was reading the story about that Nobel laureate, yes.
So, but I mean, it's a good thing if President Trump can help and emulate the condition of the Kashmiris. That what we need now is that we also need to focus on other things. For example, the United Nations Observer Group there is need to try, it's for the first time in the United Nations Security Council, and it met, they've presented a report. In the past, it used to be, just
a regular SOP.
Regular, it never used to be. Now it was studied. So the world has a much greater understanding as to what is going on.
So if I may say, I mean, Dr. Saab, that currently whatever efforts Pakistan has made so far, whether you talk about the political approach or the diplomatic approach or otherwise, Kashmir, the Indian occupied Kashmir and the atrocities committed by their soldiers out there, sir, and the people who are living a miserable, this is practically hell on earth, no matter how beautiful Kashmir is. Now this issue is under the microscope of the international community. Is that right, sir?
I think that in the last, you can say 2 years, Kashmir is very much under the microscope of the international community because of the tension on the border. Especially of the Pulwama, everyone is looking for the Kashmir, that there is some problem which can go into the war or escalate into the conflict, can escalate to the war. And at the same time, if you see that after August 5, situation is entirely deplorable and condemnable. And in Pakistani government did well politically, diplomatically. And in this context, if you see, morally, we are trying to present everywhere, and we are a natural stakeholder. And after the end of this Article 370, I think whatever they were justifying that annexation was because of the Raja or this sort kind of thing, all these things has been now quashed or you can shelve. So as a result, I think the policy of the government of Pakistan highlighting the Kashmir issue is very much there, but unfortunately, we are seeing rhetorical sport condemning the India, but there is no real, you can say, the way international community pressurizes. Maybe it's a Muslim country issue, that is important, because in the West, Muslim is very much not acceptable. But on the other side, Kashmiri is Kashmiriyat as well. So in that context, the things are going well. While we focus on Pakistan, if you see that Pakistan nowadays in a very critical situation. On the western side, we desire to finish this Afghanistan issue. On the eastern side,
the Indians believe, or they have
they are very much disturbed. They have been knocked out
with the peace process in Afghanistan.
Despite having their strategic partnership with the Kabul, they have been knocked out from the peace process. And then if you see on the eastern side, the aggressive enemy is every day talking. More than that, their rhetoric starting from the warmongering and then their rhetoric. And if you see, they are now facing some kind of a anxiety in their rhetoric, because after the 27th February 2019, I think Indians who are living in this superiority complex since 1999, because of numerically a bigger, you can say, number of their armed forces, now they start feeling a little bit afraid, because after 27, their navy attempted to intervene, their army tried to, you can say, pressurize by deploying the nuclear capable delivery vehicles in the form of BrahMos missiles. They failed to get anything. And that's why if you see, when this line of fire, they try to increase it, but to divert the attention or not, they are making a nuclear reference. And on the last Friday, when he made this statement, so what we were earlier trying to deter India or to internationalize the Kashmir, now India is doing the same thing to deter Pakistan or to internationalize the situation. But the thing is that Indians are living in a very, you can say, fool's paradigm. They think that the way Prime Minister Modi's propaganda or BJP electronic or print media gurus were able to misguide the Indians, or their state media or their within the state, their channels were able to churn out, you can say, false propaganda, Chowkidar propaganda, or you can say security propaganda or anti-Pakistan propaganda. That was well received during the election time, or even it is well received in the India at some quarters. But same thing.
Do you think that rhetoric is making any impression at the moment, sir? No.
No, within India it has. Okay. But because there is a Hindutva school of thought, there is a ultra-nationalist, there is a extreme Hindus. That is there. But and why they are doing it systematically? Because they wanted to divert the attention from what you call it the failure of Modi's economic policy. And by this way, but at the international level, if you read the American media, if you read the Western media, luckily they are not buying this. So it means that their media policy domestically successful, internationally not successful, and that is why it's not successful. I think that is the good diplomacy or aggressive, but very calculated and in a you can say more professional manner.
Right.
Our government machinery, our diplomats, our media, I think collectively Pakistani nation did well since 5th August to date.
Okay. Now, Ambassador, when you pick up the Indian news, I mean, they have a different perception altogether, even about certain statements issued by the Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia, or for that matter from the Chinese and all. Pakistan says that these two countries have technically supported us. Chinese have, even Russians have. French and the Americans, they had a different point of view. Maybe UK is busy its own issues. The European Union has its own problem. Do you think, sir, currently when you look at the Russian approach, because they've always supported India on so many occasions, especially when we talk about Kashmir. I think Kashmir would have been sorted out way before if Russians wouldn't have intervened. Do you think, sir, this new approach of the Russians, or the Chinese for that, because Chinese are directly involved, Ladakh is another area. Now, two unions are there, Ladakh is going to be treated separately. Maybe at some stage they can negotiate with the Chinese, and the other separately without any issue with Pakistan. Now, the role of the Russians, sir, because Russia seems to be an emerging power once again, sir. It is in the limelight, making headlines. Vladimir Putin is considered to be somebody who means business. Whether you talk about Crimea, you talk about Ukraine, you talk about Syria, this man has put his foot down, sir.
Yes, you know, our relations with Russia of late have been improving a lot. But you cannot forget the historical link they have with India, and especially the defense cooperation that they have. At the same time, you know, the Russians are obviously not very happy the way America and India have formed an axis. So they are also transforming their relationship somewhat with India, and that is why that they even talked about the UN Security Council resolution, which is a big change. I mean, in the past they were you know,
they used to veto it.
Vetoing this thing. So this is a very positive signal for us. Since you mentioned Crimea, you know, I think the Indians, whatever they are doing or have done in Kashmir, they thought that you know they can.
They would be seen somewhat like Russians.
You know, like Putin had done that, and like that Yahanu in Israel has done that. But you know, they are mistaken, because the situation is not the same. Let's take Israel, for example. I mean, the level of support that Israel enjoys from the Americans and the EU is nowhere near what the Indians have. Secondly, the diaspora of the Hindutva and of the American support is huge difference between them. Thirdly, you have to see that, you know, within Israel and of course in Russia as well, there is unity, political unity as far as the dealing of Crimea is concerned. Not in the case of Kashmir. As you can see, there are voices being raised there. And lastly, you see that as far as the Indians are concerned, all the neighbors, they have hostile relations with all the neighbors. Whereas you know, all the neighbors are hostile towards this. On the other hand, from Israel, they have those who are in favor of it, who are against it. So, I mean, if Modi thought he'd get away by doing this and nobody will say anything, and he can act like a, you know, big bully, and it will be accepted by the world, he was mistaken. So, the main thing is that the Hindutva policy that they are adopted from there is an inherent danger that on this, because one also sees nowadays more and more video coverages and news coming about not just the attack against Muslims, but also the Christians and the Dalits.
Minorities primarily.
Minorities in India are being done there. And you know, one of the
things... we've also learned that certain people close to Nagaland, in that particular area, so they were forced to convert. And they're not Hindus actually, but they were registered as Hindus there as well, sir. Yeah.
So the, you know, the idea is that the The West has the perception about the Muslims that they are the terrorist groups and so forth, and there is a mindset against the Muslim, from the newcons from Bush era. I think what they're seeing in India is that, look, first trying to sort out their own Kashmiris within India, then working on the Kashmiris and so on, and next thing they want to do perhaps is attack Pakistan. So, this is a very dangerous kind of development that is taking place. This mindset that they have created from there, it is important that it has to be countered. And we have, along with the plight of the Kashmiris, we have to highlight the genocide virtually that they are, carrying out of the, in India, especially they are likely to go into a genocide in Kashmir. The way they have amassed their troops, it is said that they already had about 700,000 troops there. Why bring in another 120,000 more?
Because they wanted to impose curfew, they wanted to abrogate 370, they wanted to control it, but it's not getting under control through the military means.
Yes, also there are some allegations that the RSS guys who are dressed up as there in order to do just that.
And have you seen the footages, sir?
Yes.
I mean, the way they are stoning the houses, the way they are torching them, the way they are burning them, the way they are picking up people, the way they are beating them. Yes. And, setting an example that if you will raise your voice, we will make an example out of you.
Yes.
This is so unfortunate.
Well, so we have, apart from the humanitarian issue there and the human rights issue from there, there's also the legal aspect of what India has done. And I think we have taken the right decision by the government to go to the International Court of Justice to try and resolve that. I'd like to add something more to this because of this. We have been talking about the fact that India is following a fascist policy. Modi is behaving like a Hitler and so on. I think this what we need to do also is that, not long ago before he came into power, Modi was seen as a terrorist. He was seen as a
butcher of Gujarat.
Now, and this tendency of his, he's continuing that within the country against the minorities, also into Kashmir. I think we should move a case for to the International Court of Justice or Criminal Court of Justice, I beg your pardon, to get an opinion on them, on Modi's role in Gujarat, and to ban him.
Can that be used as an example that 2,000 people were practically killed on his behest, and the way they were killed, sir, that also matters. One of the Muslim, he was I think an MP, sir, MNA, like in Gujarat, and his house was attacked, and practically, sir, all those people they were holding axes and all, and his hands, his legs, they were all chopped off while he was alive. I mean, because he was trying to save certain Muslims in his house. So this is what is the approach. So you can well imagine. Doctor, if you allow me, sir, we've been joined in by Anur Iqbal Saab, sir, senior journalist from USA. Let's see what's going on out there and whether this statement by President Donald Trump has made any headlines out there regarding Kashmir. Assalamu alaikum, Anur Iqbal Saab.
Walaikum assalam.
Anur Saab, thank you very much, sir, for taking out your time and talking to us. Sir, first of all, tell us what exactly is going to happen now when we hear that Donald Trump is not trying to pressurize any country, but rather he's trying to persuade the two heads, Narendra Modi and Prime Minister Imran Khan, to sort of apply constraint and also move towards negotiations. But now, sir, you all know that the Indians, they're not ready to come on the negotiation table, whereas Pakistan has offered them so many times to sit and sort this issue out, sir, or rather all the pending issues for that matter. Your take, sir.
Well, I don't know. I mean, see, there is a concern, I would say grave concern in Washington about what might happen in that region. People think that the situation in Kashmir could lead to yet another war, and this war could be very dangerous as both countries have nuclear weapons. So obviously the United States wants to stay engaged, the United States wants to help them out. But there is also a realization in Washington that they do not have enough influence on India to force it to do something. India would only listen to them to a certain extent, and after that, it will not take their instructions, or it will not take their advice. So I think President Trump and other U.S. officials are working within certain limits, and then they are trying to persuade both sides to come to some sort of arrangement. They want to avoid war. They want to avoid further complication. They want to avoid violence. But I'm not sure how successful they could be in this situation.
All right, so you mentioned that the Indians, I mean, they will not get any sort of benefit out of it. Neither will Pakistan. They have their own understanding. We have our own. Now, when you talk about that enough influence in order to persuade the Indians, obviously India is a huge market. 45 crore people, that's the size of the middle class, twice the size of the total population of Pakistan. Economy matters, digits matter, numbers matter, sir. Do you think just because India is a big market and over here money matters, and when you talk about President Donald Trump, or for that matter all the allies, they are businessmen at the end of the day, sir. Businessmen slash politician, let's put it this way. So economy matters.
Obviously, there are two things that are very important. Number one, as we all know, that there is no friendship between two nations. There's their only interest, and so first every nation looks after its own interest, and then the economy also matters a lot. I mean, your foreign policy in today's world, your foreign policy is only as effective as your economy is. So, there are many American companies that are doing business with India. There are many other companies that are looking forward to doing business with India. Americans are trying to attract Indians into all sorts of things, business deals and other things. So I think India's economy, India's size, India's influence in the world matters. We saw it in the United Nations. We see it here in Washington. But that does not mean that we should give up or that Pakistan should actually abandon its policy in Kashmir. We have to do what we have to do. We have to try to persuade the world. We have to show what is happening in Kashmir. And that requires a long-term engagement with the international community, sending delegations to Washington, talking to the think tank people, staying in touch with the media. And one thing I must say, the U.S. media has not only shown a lot of interest in the events in Kashmir, but they have been largely, almost all of them have been very sympathetic to the people of Kashmir. Almost all of them have condemned the Indian action. And all of them point out that Indians have arrested more than 6,000 people, that there has been curfew since August 5. So I think this human rights situation and India's illegal action is being highlighted by the media, which may not have an immediate impact on the policy making. It will ultimately influence the policymakers as well.
All right, thank you very much, Iqbal sir. Dr. Saab, a couple of points. For example, one thing is very clear, and basically it's an understood fact, rightly pointed out by Mr. Iqbal, that economy and diplomacy, they're related. Now, economic diplomacy is the new word which we hear these days. It's a new term, rather. Now, he says that the Americans have a certain level of influence. They can't twist their arm. They can't tell them to do more, like Pakistan. So, at the end of the day, the kind of influence the Indians have in their universities, in their think tanks, in the State Department, in the White House, and so many other departments, one has to admit that they have an edge over there, sir. Do you think the efforts made by Pakistan at that front, I'm not saying that we need a comparison, but are they enough?
No, look, Faisal, we have to not ignore the effects of, we call it geoeconomics.
Correct, sir.
And geoeconomics is very significant in the 21st century. But at the same time, geoeconomics is now giving way again to geopolitics. And in that context, even, not now even, India has always maintained its strategic autonomy. And it's trying to maintain its strategic autonomy. And Americans were, or you can say in the last 3 decades almost, within the United States, it was deliberately cultivated India as a strategic partner after 92 onward. India as a democratic partner, India as a big economic market. And we have to not forget, in the real politics, your strategic and or you can military and economic interests have always as a priority over your, where you can say norms or other these things. These all democratic norms or these things are just for the sake of rhetoric practically in the real politics. Having said
And they
this,
do not mean anything in the real business.
yeah, the morality has no place. Otherwise, look.
If you're even if
there's
you're morally
look,
correct, but you're economically weak, you won't be heard.
Economic, military. So in that context, yes, India has a big lobby. India, for example, is exporting around 150 billion softwares, 140 billion, sorry, and we are exporting 100 billion. So we have to admit these, and our size is also limited. But at the same time, we have our own geostrategic significance, and in that context, we have our own, you can say, way of highlighting. If the world is not going to realize or not ready to act what is happening in Kashmir, Indian occupied Kashmir, especially within the frame of human rights. Look, Pakistan did well. If they have a majority, number game, everywhere they are strategic partner, X, Y, Z, they have an Indo-Pacific strategy common. All these factors goes in favor of India. But you cannot forget, if you continue hammering this human rights issue by state terrorism in Kashmir, it has its own, you can say, positive outcome. For instance, 2018 Human Rights Commission report, read that. Follow up this year in April, read that. What is coming in the other newspaper, or even this United Nations Security Council. And even if it is a consultative meeting, at least for 1.5 hours it was discussion. It has, you can say, completely nullified India's claim that Kashmir is their internal affair. So I think Pakistan's policy, or the way we are trying to project it from different levels, it is very effective, but we have to make it more, you can say, effective.
Doctor, when you say
For
make
example,
it more effective, what exactly do we need to inject in that
I
policy?
think that we have to engage Kashmiri diaspora, which is very big in Britain. 40 seats in the election, this Kashmiri diaspora has effect in the House of Commons election. Kashmiri diaspora in United States, Kashmiri diaspora in what you call it in Europe. We have to mobilize them. Second, we have to highlight that in India, and it's a reality, you can say BJP is having this purification of Hindu nationalism that is not against Muslims only. It's against Sikhs, it's against Christians. If I'm not wrong, recently I learned in Uttar Pradesh province, there are 54% Christians, or majority are Christians.
UP?
UP or somewhere in provinces.
UP has a population of around 20 crores, sir.
So we should make them ally. So instead of simply highlighting that Muslims are butchered in India, no, yes, Muslims are butchered, but in addition to the Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Dalits. So it's a big number. So we have to make them systematically our ally in our voice raising.
Sir, the role of Sikhs or the voices coming from them, aren't they very encouraging for the people living in Kashmir?
They are very encouraging. Look, in India, there are two things which we have to see. India is passing through a very, you can say, interesting time, I can say.
Shouldn't you call that transformation, sir?
Transformation, interesting time. Why I'm saying Modi or Hindutva forces in the last, you can say, 92, they started gaining momentum. And then after Babri Mosque, and then later on, they became successful. And today, they have a highest number of seats in the Lok Sabha. And in the coming days, he will be getting the majority in the Rajya Sabha.
Yeah.
That's why he's working more on this thing. In that process, what happened, that he didn't pay any attention to the election commission, which had a very much authority or sanctity in the previous election. And second is, he's not paying any attention to the Indian Apex Court, I mean the Supreme Court, because on this 370 article in April 2018, Indian Supreme Court made a
verdict. They passed, yes, they went against
so
that. Yeah.
he's not paying attention to that. Certainly there are some fundos are within that, and definitely there is a difference. That is the second area.
But don't you
Third
think,
is-
even like the way, for example, the Parliament takes a decision, over here we have seen that certain decisions were overruled by the Supreme Court of
Yeah, but
Pakistan.
that-
But in India, sir, we have seen that the Parliament is considered as very supreme,
No, no,
very
no.
powerful.
Let me make it clear. Let me make it clear.
There's a confusion, so please
No,
tell
no,
that.
no. This is, we are wrongly interpreting. In 1970s, Parliament made certain decisions in India. The Supreme Court of India gave a verdict. They say, yes, Parliament has a sovereignty, but on a fundamental rights, or there are certain rights, Parliament cannot make any law. The inherited rights, Kashmiri's life, Kashmiri's freedom, Kashmiri's right of self-respect, Kashmiri's honor, it's a fundamental right according to the Indian system, Indian constitution. I'm not talking about the others. So if their constitution go with their, if their judges follow the precedent of 1970s, they have to give the relief to the Kashmiris. If they are not following, then they are violating there. So that's why I'm saying it's interesting time. The final point is, first time Indian armed forces have been politicized. If you see in the election, the way the Indian armed forces have been used, and now they are using, so it's a peak. What our, you can say, founding fathers were saying, and here in Pakistan, interestingly, liberals of the Pakistan, you can say civil society in Pakistan, even many people, very educated people, they question the partition, the logic of partition, the logic of two-nation theory. But today it has been confirmed. What the guy was saying in his 14 points and later on in the 3-round conference is tyranny of majority, Hindu majority. It is now we are seeing the picture. What these Mahmouda Mufti or the Indian pro-Kashmiri leadership is now presenting or trying to express to the world that we committed a mistake because we supported the living with the Kashmir, with India. So in this case,
all right,
and then final, which we have to highlight. Here, many people confuse International Court of Justice with this, that no, we can go, even if it has a moral authority, its decision has a moral impact. We have to not forget there was one lawyer from the, I think, Norway. He took this case of Sudanese, and in 2008, Sudan is not a member of the ICJ. Even in his absentia, Omar al-Bashir was declared as he was convicted. So we have to take these things against, and Modi can be convicted in the International Court of Justice.
But there's a difference between Sudan and India.
No,
That's the point.
no. It's a fundamental. You have a precedent. If we can fight our case properly, if we can go there, and if you ask the Ahmad Bilal Sufi, he will give you the. We have a big chair. You can say here. You can say advantage in this case, even if it is a moral. What is our fight with this? We are talking moral issue, we are talking politically, we are talking diplomatically. And they are blaming us, and we are, what we call it, sword is hanging on us.
You are on solid footing as far as morality is concerned.
But you have to highlight. You have to highlight. So we cannot back on it. We can force, continue on every channel. And final point, I think our Prime Minister had already given, and now extension of the Bajwa has also established, that we are going to continue our military strategy. That is current military strategy, and that is very clear.
Which we have adopted is going to be
what is our today's military strategy?
All right, sir.
Our military strategy is, if you go for escalation, we are going to further escalate. If you are going to act, we are going to act. But we are a mature nation. We are going to have what we call it effective response with maximum restraint. That is your military strategy, if you can see in the last 6-7 months.
And we have always been a defensive force.
So it has been further endorsed. So Indians are not going to, and if they go for military adventurism, we should respond the way the Prime Minister said, that if they use the brick, we are going to hit them with stone. So no, this is the time we should continue, because they are not going to increase LOC fire further or escalate. Maybe it can escalate because of the probability
the kind of weapons they are using there, the artillery and all.
No, that is the dynamics which we cannot control. So we should be prepared. But here the government has to, you can say, further broaden the horizon of this debate. Otherwise, and we are, I think, winning it in a way. If we are not a strategic partner of the United States, if the India is their big partner, a big buyer of the weaponry, if the Trump is talking in a triangular manner, that makes sense.
The love triangle between Imran Khan Saab, Narendra Modi and Donald Trump.
That's the
and the interesting part is that a lot of people believe, since let me refer to that tweet by Donald Trump in which he said, "My good friend Imran Khan, I mean, they met for the first time, but
Yeah.
you know, that relationship has already developed. But anyway, now, sir, another important area, and that is about one general perception, Ambassador Saab, that is that Pakistan tried its level best to highlight the, I'm not talking about this particular issue of the abrogation of Article 370, I'm talking about the past, that we do believe that, forget about Kashmir for the moment, let's focus on the human rights issue. And we tried, but that wasn't sort of absorbed and digested by the majority because it was an effort, but wasn't making any difference as such. But this time, because of their own doing, this issue has become the headlines of the international press. Don't you think, sir, it's like blessing in disguise in a way, sir?
Well, it is a blessing in disguise. Two quick points. I mean, apart from the Kashmiri diaspora, we also need to focus on the media. The media has come out in good support of Pakistan because of the situation there. So we have to, you know, media to media, our think tanks have to work with the think tanks from there. Our parliamentarians have to approach the parliamentarians. So we have to build up the Kashmir case from the people so that the governments will then be obliged to rethink their policy despite the economic interest.
Obliged on what grounds? So that is the point.
Sorry?
Obliged on what grounds? I mean, if they are
if
following
there
a
is
certain
pressure
stance.
when they are being questioned about the support, blind support, when the human rights violations are taking place and the killings are taking place from there. Now, Kashmir, you know, this by abrogating these two articles, India is virtually colonized or annexed Kashmir. Now, under the United Nations Charter, the people who are under foreign occupation or you know, they are being colonized have a right to, you know, fight against them by all means possible. And the United Nations, even the EU, under the rule, they are obliged to put sanctions on not only from the country is responsible, but even individuals which are responsible. So, you know, if
the international community, under the command of the Americans, can put sanctions on the Russians, even on their athletes for that matter, exactly. Sir. So, I mean, it's a very strong body, but in the case of India, I would doubt it, sir.
Well, you know, the fact is that Pakistan is in a very tight situation. On one hand, we want to have a new Pakistan. We have economic problems within the country. On the other hand, we have now the Kashmir issue, for which, if we want to really fully project it, we need to have finances and we need to have resources for doing that. And I think for that reason, it is very crucial that we see that we try to play as much positive role as we can to help out the Americans pull out from Afghanistan. So there is peace from there. This will dilute the Indian influence there, especially, you know, the string of the consulates they have there to spy on, etc. on us. Also, once it opens up the energy corridor, the trade corridors, etc., etc. And thirdly, I think if this happens, you know, the important thing will be that at the moment it suits India to have ignore Pakistan, or they have no incentive to improve relations with Pakistan. But if we are talking about a corridor, a trade corridor, even for India all the way to Central Asia and you know, from Pakistan and Afghanistan, and the resources that they can also enjoy, energy corridor, which they also need from here. So there may be some incentive in, you know, not in the short term, but in time to come. And
they should be natural allies in this whole deal, basically.
Thing. So we should be working in that direction. We should try to focus on Afghanistan to see whether we can bring about peace from there. That will have an impact also with not only in Kashmir, but with our relations with India.
Dr. Saab, last 30 seconds, quick comment. So there was a statement by the Indian where he was blaming Pakistan for inciting violence within the Indian occupied Kashmir. And at the same time, since it is our record that we do believe that peace in Afghanistan, since a lot has been handed over to Pakistan, we need to do a lot in that regard. That is going to get derailed because our attention, our focus would be on the other side. Do you buy this, sir? Because the Indians believe that this is not the case.
No, this is there is a reality in it. Look, if there is a more pressure on us, our attention is divided. naturally we cannot contribute as effectively as we can do if there is a peace on our eastern side. So naturally our leadership is focusing on it, our media is focusing on it, everyone is focusing on it. Here, if we have to encourage on this side, that is the attention divided. And for us, our eastern side is more important, number one, though western side is equally. Second, we have to also take into account for maintaining peace in Afghanistan or for a broader perspective, government has already started operations against the militant organization, clearing there. But when you start killing and butchering, the way what is happening in Kashmir and the way the world is showing apathy, just only rhetoric or sport, I think the spillover impact, more radicalization, especially in this part of the world and as well as the other part of the world. Indians should also realize that tentacles of the Daesh or Islamic states, they are everywhere in South Asia. That is the biggest challenge, even in Afghanistan. What happened? Taliban said that we were not behind.
Did you hear that statement, sir? Yes, yes.
So who are there? So these are very important issues. So the world has to realize peace in Afghanistan is in our interest. We should focus on it. But at the same time, if our attention is diverted on eastern side,
all right,
how we can focus on
all
it?
right. I think, sir, there's another very important area. We would definitely try to throw light on that. The role of the Afghan Taliban and the Muslim extremists out there. That, for example, if peace prevails in Afghanistan, and which India doesn't want, what will be the future of that? They could maybe start looking towards Kashmir.
Even if there cannot be, if there's a peace in Afghanistan, if even not even a single person move into the India, or you can create a problem. Peace in Afghanistan means there is no anarchy. If there's no anarchy, the Indian consulates or the Indian RAW cannot play a role there.
Absolutely, this is what they don't want.
Absence.
So that's why.
Encircling policy of Pakistan without, because they have a defense pact with Iran, but since they stopped buying the oil, Iranians are very much agitated.
But
similarly, if there is a peace in Afghanistan, they have no
presence
at the same time,
at the same time, when I did not, on purpose, I did not touch on the role of the Muslim states. Forget about Turkey or certain other countries which have supported Pakistan. But when you look at Saudi Arabia, they've given the high civil award to Narendra Modi. UAE is thinking on the same lines as well. So that is something which I think, obviously, sir, we need to strengthen ourselves. We need to be strong enough economically. Sir,
1 minute. Sir, I think in the foreign and strategic policy, religion is good for rhetoric, otherwise it has no significance.
Absolutely. Dr. Saab, thank you very much, sir. It was a pleasure. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, at 8 tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.